Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Babbling Irons match preview with myself and Sloth. I'll be honest, we didn't do a review of the Spurs game because it was just, we didn't need to review it, did we? There was so much that went wrong. We probably should have reviewed it upon reflection, but we just couldn't do it. So, we're back with the Man United preview. And we're hoping for a different result, aren't we, Sloth? Because I think Man United and West Ham, they haven't been in the best of form so far this season, both showing similarities in terms of defensive frailties and not being able to control games. And we're going to get into the stats and stuff and break down how we feel like we can beat Man United, even without one of our key players in Mo Kudus in the team as well. So, yeah, if you enjoyed the preview, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for the content as we're back on it again. And yeah, first, before we get into the stats, Sloth, how are you feeling going into this game? We've had a few days to kind of reflect, calm down from last weekend's disaster, and now we're back again with an important game against Man United on Sunday. So, what's your feelings going into this game?
I just feel like we have to do better. I don't think it could be possible to. Well, actually, we could have lost 4-0. Like we might not have scored, so it could have gone worse fractionally. But I think the main thing we have to be looking for is a point, a bare minimum. I think we have to go out there at least really show a step up and a lot more to us. And you alluded to the fact that Kudus isn't going to be there, but I think that's got to be something that Somerville is chomping at the bit for, and hopefully gonna show Lopetegui why he should be involved and start games.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Let's take a look at the stats so far this season and how we compare to Man United at the 8-game stage. So 8 points for West Ham from 8 games, just a slight 3 points more increase for Man United with 11. They've only scored 7 goals from 8 games in the Premier League this season, which is less than 1 per game, which is scary for them. But also in terms of goals scored, we're slightly higher at 11. However, our goals conceded far outweighs Man United's with 15 goals conceded. I think we're in the bottom 5 in terms of goals conceded so far this season. And yeah, United have only conceded 9, still not the best record. And we'll get into the expected stats after this, but it's worse for Man United in that sense. In terms of positions, we are 15th currently, which is not good. And United themselves, in 12th position, they'll be hoping to do better. If we shift it over to the expected stats, so we should be on 9.36. So we've actually underperformed our XG. Av has Man United slightly with 11.84. Their expected goals scored is almost double what they've actually scored, which again suggests their quality in front of goal has been very poor. And ours has kind of been on par, slightly underperformed. Ours is with 12.86. So pretty similar goals scored, expected goals scored for both teams there. And even expected goals conceded. We've conceded 15. We've been expected to concede 15. So defensively, we've been as bad as it looks on paper. But United, however, they've kind of papered over the cracks a little bit in terms of getting away with some stuff because their expected goals conceded is a lot higher than the 9 they've actually conceded at 14.52. And expected position, we should be 1 position higher in 14th than we are. And United should be theoretically 2 positions higher than they currently are, sitting in 12th right now. So I think that data kind of suggests 2 things to me, Sloth. One, we're extremely similar right now in terms of the trajectory we've been on this season with Lopetegui and how Ten Hag's setting up at Man United. But B, also just how frail we both are as teams. There's expected goals conceded at 15 and 14, 15.5 and 14.5 respectively after 8 games. That is not good enough. We're almost expected to concede 2 goals a game at the moment, which is an incredibly difficult rate to sustain. And we saw it last season. We conceded over 70 goals in the Premier League. At this rate, we'd be matching that. So something has to change there, doesn't it, Sloth, from a West Ham perspective in terms of our defensive strengths? But do you see similarities with how Man United have started the season and West Ham so far?
Definitely. And strange enough, I think I see a lot of similarities with how we started last season as well. You look at the chart from last season, so the table from last season, and how we've performed. It's not near identical, but it's very, very similar. And I think Man United, the sort of parallel between us at the moment, it's also that issue in midfield. And you know, there's been a lot of vocal people online and even on the telly at times where a West Ham legend, in fact, has said that Scott McTominay, he looks like the worst sale of the window so far. You know, he's gone to Napoli and he's absolutely smashing it. But he's someone that personifies a lot of the problems that both teams have, where it's this driving physical force in the middle of the park who can put in a tackle, win back possession, and drive forward, that we both lack. And I think that's key in terms of how you look at both sides, because fundamentally they should be very good sides on paper. And you look at the Manchester United attack, you know, I thought they had a decent window in terms of who they brought in, and then it collapsed at the end. And you could say exactly the same sort of thing about us. I thought we had a very strong window, and I still think that. But I do think that when you look at Man United, there's a number of issues there that haven't really been addressed. And I think they've moved from relying on experience to more youthful players, and maybe putting a lot of expectation on players like Rashford, who, while they're not old, they're very experienced. And players like Casemiro, who, let's face it, has seen much better days, but seems to be really frail in terms of how much he's contributing on the pitch. And you see someone like Fernandes getting frustrated because of that. And I think when you analyze both teams, I think we're personally playing a bit more as a solid together unit. But yeah, and the contrast there is that, like, how bad must Manchester United be? If I think, you know, it's a very worrying thing for, I'm sure, a lot of Manchester United fans. But I think they'll turn it around quite easily. And historically, who are the team that most sides do that against? It's generally us, isn't it? So
I guess the main differences between us right now is Lopetegui's been in charge 4 or 5 months. Ten Hag's had 2 years now in charge of Man United, and he's been able to shape this team how he wants it. Really, you know, he's made some really questionable signings. You know, the likes of Anthony over someone like Mo Kudus. You know, they've just brought in, as you said, Casemiro came in. That wasn't the best signing at the time, and now it's, you know, he's definitely not up to pace for the Premier League over a 38-game period. They've brought in Ugarte, who, again, I don't think fits the mold of what they needed as that 6. And again, that's the biggest similarities with West Ham and Man United at the moment. It's the midfield. You know, how leggy both of our midfields look and how exposed we are in that midfield three. Because, you know, you look at how Man United lined up. You know, they did win against Brentford at last weekend. They drew with Fenerbahce last night. But the midfield that they played in that midfield three against Brentford was Casemiro, Eriksen, and Bruno to start the game. So you then compare that with ours. What was it? Guido, Souček, Paqueta. There is no mobility in either of our midfields. It's so easy to bypass, and it's become a serious problem for both teams. I think with Ten Hag, Ten Hag is not a good manager, in my opinion. I don't think he's the solution for Man United at all. I don't think the way that they've decided to keep him off the back of that FA Cup win and leave things in the dark this summer, and the way that's been whole constructed and then given him so much financial backing this summer again, it's not the way to sustain a football club. And, you know, there's slight parallels with how we've done it, but not to the same extent. But I just don't think it was a massive problem when we kind of started the season. I said we just don't have that mobility in midfield. Guido Rodriguez is a very good signing, but we don't have the mobility to play with him. He's going to get exposed, and that's what's happening at the moment. And, you know, I said it even before that with Edson Alvarez, he's not mobile enough to play as that lone 6 without legs around him. He just isn't able to do that. So for me,
one of the things that I find baffling about, you know, Manchester United's business this summer, you look at the fact that one of their top targets was apparently Edson Alvarez, and when you look at the recruitment that he's made, they have issues, and I don't think any of the players that he's brought in have addressed those issues.
Yeah.
And even Xerxes, who I'm a big fan of, and I touted for West Ham for quite a long time, he looks lost.
So does
And
Hoyland, really.
I think they're almost a prime example of needing a new manager. That new manager bounce, and I think to be honest, as soon as they get rid of him, they'll see results. But it's just a question of how long he can keep churning away and make it, like scraping it back at the last.
Yeah, I guess that's what happens with managers. People paint over the bigger picture with domestic success. So Man United winning the FA Cup last season massively papered over those cracks of how poor they were in the Premier League and how open they were under Erik ten Hag and how poorly structured they were. And to be honest, Lopetegui, he's only been here I said I'm still going to give him 15 to 20 games to really assess it, but he has to address the issues that we have, and we cannot continue to play in the same way we're trying to play with this personnel, because we're just getting overrun in midfield and we're getting exposed with the way we're trying to play.
I think you mentioned it then, success on the pitch and even, the perceived notion of it off the pitch can come back to bite a club. And I'm not looking to divide anyone and say, bring up old wounds, but I think you can very easily say that about David Moyes and Lopetegui. David Moyes worked with a small squad, kept the squad small, didn't bring in the sort of players that we're talking about, and a striker. Now, the key reason that I'm mentioning that is because Lopetegui also hasn't either. And we wanted Fofana last season. We got James Prowse instead. Again, they're not similar players by any metric. They're just midfielders. And this season, we tried to apparently get Fofana again, and he's gone off to AC Milan, but we didn't follow it up the same way we didn't follow it up with Zakaria. And I think when you have a scouting system, and this goes for both clubs, because there's clearly a disjointed way of operating from what's very clearly needed on the pitch and what they actually get during the transfer window. And I think that if you're telling your staff, look, we need to get in young players and you need to do it with this much money, and I want you to build a squad. And they go, okay, I can get 5 or 6 players in, or 9 players in our case, and we can build like this. It's going to flesh out the squad a little bit, but I really want to try and bring in this type of player, whether it's a goal scorer or driving midfielder. That needs to be addressed almost as the utmost importance. And I feel like both clubs haven't done that. They've gone, we're going to bring in 8 or 9 players. We're going to bring in 6 players and big name, Ugarte and Xerxes. We're going to try and paper over the problems with signings, and it's just not worked.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think when you look at, again, with West Ham more specifically here, we are not following a profiling method when we're in the transfer window. And we saw it with the switch up from Duran to Fulkrug, completely different strikers. And how many different strikers were we linked with over the summer that were different profiles? And, they weren't a set figure of what we wanted to do. Same with the midfield. Like, I remember saying it when we signed Soler. This is nothing on him personally. He just isn't the right fit. He isn't someone that was going to make that big impact or be able to transform that midfield or be that player that's going to break up play and move us forwards in playing in the central midfield. And now that's, again, I'm not going to write him off yet. It's very early days, but the early signs are that he's not the right profile for that midfield, which is why he's been forced out onto the left wing a lot and, playing on the right. So I think we have big problems that we need to address. And I think Man United have bigger problems that they need to address because they've been doing it for a longer period of time than West Ham. Do I think Lopetegui can turn it around? Yes, I do. Do I think he will? Too early to say. As I said, I'm going to give him 15 to 20 games to see how he reacts to these performances, because he's had a long time now to integrate these players in. The only player really he hasn't had at his disposal is Nicholas Fulkrug, which I do kind of sympathise with a little bit. But again, the strategy wasn't there in the summer to go after a specific target. If we're going after Samu and John Duran, why would you then suddenly turn around and sign a 31-year-old just because they've had a good season, played 50 odd games, had a good Euros? That's not sustainable. So I think there's bigger question marks around that. But looking more specifically at this game, it's always an interesting game when we play Man United at home. I think we've had some pretty good success against them at the London Stadium. This is a big game for both managers. And if either team loses this game, the pressure is going to be pretty insurmountable. So how are you feeling going into this game, Sloth? Obviously, with the defeat to Spurs fresh in our memory still. Obviously, United have got the win against Brentford and they've gone to Fenerbahce, which, again, could play to our hands a little bit because we've got a little bit more rest to go into this game. But what's your thoughts going into this game?
I just think we need to get at them. We need to, if we start like we did against Manchester City and we have that pace and intensity, I think we could really unsettle them early on. I think the problem is that as much as we've kind of derided them, Manchester United undoubtedly have the quality to hurt you at any time.
Yeah.
And even if we get a goal early on, I don't see us keeping a clean sheet. And you know, no. I think it's strange because I think any West Ham fan will tell you that they've been impressed with, you know, Max Gilman and
Tadibo.
Oh, even Mavropanos at times has looked quite tidy, but it's well, when he came on at right back, but I think, you know, Wan-Bissaka as well has looked tidy at times, but I don't feel like we're going to keep a clean sheet. I don't feel, and I think that is a really worrying thing. So there needs to be a real statement, and whether that is just we play ugly football and we look to hit on the counter and almost play back into David Moyes fans, which could, like, I don't know, it could start that conversation over again. I just think that we need to do something that will get us a result. I can't see us keeping a clean sheet. I can see Manchester United, you know, really going for it, whether they're winning or not. I can see them scoring a goal, and that's my main worry.
How would you line up with Kudus being out? Because we'd expect Somerville to come in for Kudus in that front three, and I'm hoping that is the case. And we see Bowen go back onto the right-hand side, maybe. Who would be your focal point up top? Would you move Bowen into striker and maybe someone else right wing, or would you do something else? Because for me, I'm really tempted to put Paqueta at false nine because he hasn't been good enough in midfield. He keeps costing us in games. He keeps giving the ball away too cheaply in dangerous areas. If you tell him to go and be that focal false nine, which he actually did quite well in moments last season, I know we shifted it around a bit and we got some success from it. And I feel like that might be a good play there, having Somerville and Bowen play off Paqueta and give Paqueta the, okay, we don't want you to be part of the midfield deep build-up. I want you to be almost a focal point, the false nine, create from further up the pitch. So if you do lose the ball, we've got midfield bodies around you to cover it a little bit more. So it just offers that security and maybe gives Paqueta the freedom to move his focus towards the attacking phase of the game and you know, less dependency defensively. So what would you do with the front three?
I think that's a really good shout. I do think that the counterpoint to that is that for me, Paqueta has been so bad and wasteful in possession that I honestly don't really think he deserves the chance to play over, say, you know, I don't think it's fair to drop Antonio for Paqueta. And look, Antonio has been really poor, bar the Ipswich game. And let's face it, that's a side that we should be beating regardless. You know, even if we stuck Paqueta in that false nine, we should be beating them anyway. But I don't think that you can really drop him because Paqueta has been so bad that Antonio, I think he'd get his nose out of joint. And that's nothing against Antonio's attitude. I just don't think it's fair. And Paqueta, in my opinion, has to do a lot more. And he's someone who undoubtedly has the ability, whether or not you want to try and defend him and say about the gambling case over his head. In my opinion, it's completely irrelevant in terms of how you perform on the pitch. That is your time to go out there and just focus on everything else. You've got one goal in your mind, and it should be to have a good game. And he just looks so far off the pace that I'm not convinced at the moment that he's got the mental strength to balance both things. So if it was my choice, I'd probably put him on the bench, to be honest.
Who would you bring into the midfield? So we'd play Somerville, Bowen, Antonio as our front three. Who would your midfield three be?
Do you know what? I'd probably give Soler a chance. I'm not saying that he's like. I'm not saying that he is the solution.
I wouldn't be surprised to see that.
Well, I just think Paqueta's been so bad.
Yeah.
And there was one moment in the Spurs game which, for me, really summed up one of the issues that he has, where he tried to play a pass with the outside of his boot, and the commentator said, "Oh, what a piece of skill from Paqueta." He'd given it away. There were easier passes on, and it's like, you could have easily just passed that to someone 5 yards across from you. You could have played as a really simple ball, or you could have delivered across with a bit of venom and pace. And to me, it just looks like he's trying to play for a highlight reel or to try and make himself feel better. So I would put someone like Carlos Soler in there, who's maybe got a bit of a point to prove, and will offer you pretty much the ability of Paqueta, but with hopefully a lot less of the just
antics.
Antics.
No, I you know what, I wouldn't even be opposed to that happening. I think Paqueta, as you say, he just hasn't performed well at all. We know the quality he has and how important he can be for West Ham, but when he's at a detriment to the team right now, you can't keep playing the same players that are performing so poorly. That's when you have to change things up, and as a manager, you have to be strong on that. So it will be interesting to see how Lopetegui lines up, as well as Man United. As you say, they've got an abundance of quality in their team. Garnacho, Rashford, Bruno, even Højlund up front is a difficult striker to manage. So they do have quality. Dalot right back. It'll be interesting to see how they line up in their back four with some of the injuries and stuff they're doing. I know he played Mazraoui as a number 10 in the first half against Fenerbahce, which again, I don't agree with, but that's Ten Hag for you. Score prediction stuff. I find this one really, really difficult to do because I keep swinging back and forth on a pendulum of we're either going to get spanked or we actually might nick it against a very poor Man United team being at home. So optimistic or pessimistic? What we going with?
I'm going to try and be optimistic. I'm going to say 2-1.
Yeah.
I think I can't see us keeping a clean sheet. And I think it will be a case of if we get the first goal, we will be in a good place. I think if we concede early, I think it will be a really tough day.
Yeah, no, I agree. I had 2-1 on my predictions, so I'm going to stick with that. Hopefully we do. We need a massive, massive performance, and then most importantly, we need 3 points on the board against a Man United team that is fragile, but also, as you mentioned, has the quality to hurt you in those moments. So it's going to be a tough task, but it'll be interesting to see A, how Lopetegui sets up, and B, the approach we take as a unit, and whether he goes strong with some personnel drops. Without Kudus in the team, who's he going to bring in? Will Somerville come in? Will Paqueta play? There's a lot of question marks around this game that will be answered just before 2 p.m. on Sunday. So, yeah, let us know in the comments down below. What are your score predictions for this game? How do you see it going? Lopetegui or Ten Hag? Who's going to come out on top? Let us know down below. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed the preview. Subscribe to the channel for more content. And stuff. Until the next one.
Come on, you
ones.